This is the Mooncast.
Where are you at?
I'm in Bulgaria, man.
Oh, Bulgaria. Well,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. 10% corporate tax.
Ah, there you go. Good man. Good man.
Yeah, man. Are you a Packers fan?
I am a Packers owner. I have the
Oh.
certificate, so I call it fan tax. You pay $250 because Packers are the only publicly traded team.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, when they need to add on to the stadium or something, they offer more stock options. So there's no point in owning more than one because it doesn't really provide you with any benefits. There's no profit sharing or, there's no real asset to it other than you get a really cool certificate. You get to attend an owners meeting where you get to vote on new board of directors. They'll do whatever they want besides, allow you to be on the board. But it's just fun stuff like that. Anyway, it's a rough year for the Packers. I think they're a building year.
Did you get also? There's benefits with the asset appreciation too, as well, of the stock or the equity, or no?
There's no appreciation. No, what I
Oh.
paid for it is untransferable. I can't sell it to anybody else. I can pass it on to a family member. That's about the extent of what you can do.
Okay.
It literally is what I call fan tax. You pay for it, and it does absolutely nothing else for you.
Oh man!
Other than you can say you're an owner. That's about it. That's the extent of it.
That's pretty cool, man. It's pretty cool
Yeah.
flex and stuff, man. Thank you so much for coming on to the Mooncast, man.
Well,
I appreciate you.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Can you introduce yourself a little bit to the audience? Let them know who you are and your prior history and stuff like that.
Oh, you bet. My name is Dan Paulson. I own a company called Envision Development International, and I essentially work with business owners to help them get out of their own way in most cases. So it's dealing with any issues related to workplace culture, business operations. I have also business partners that help me on the areas of finance and other areas as well. But that's primarily what I do. I figure out where the problems are at and then go in and figure out how to fix them.
Nice. It's sort of like Lean Six Sigma.
There's a little bit of that. I apply some of those skill sets to it. But I would say it's more heavily weighted in dealing with the workplace culture issues because that's where 99% of the problems are at is the relationship between business owners and leaders and their work teams. I know we'll probably talk later about, how do you keep people engaged and motivated and stuff, but that's really what it boils down to is most business owners and most leaders are very heavily in the business. I call it in the weeds. They're working on day-to-day operational stuff that they've hired other people to do, but they're unwilling to let go of certain tasks or coach their people up. And that's really what happens most of the time is your employees know a lot of times what needs to be done and how it could possibly be fixed, but they're never given the opportunity to do so. So I help uncover a lot of those issues. And then, yes, you apply some of the Lean or Six Sigma, tactics to help implement those things. And there's more project management after that, making sure the owners are doing what they're supposed to be doing. And the people are doing their jobs as well.
Yeah. I actually like to follow up on that because I struggle with that too as well, is sort of relinquishing that control because I'm kind of a perfectionist and I hate when things aren't done the way I want them to be done,
Exactly. And that's the problem where a lot of owners, let's face it, your company is like your baby. In most cases, if you started the business, you grew it, you knew what it took to make it work, you put in the blood, sweat, and tears to make it go. You then hire people because it got bigger than just you. And there's this expectation that there's my way and it's the right way. Yeah. And while that has some element of truth to it, as you pointed out, perfectionism, I think that's a trait of many business owners, including myself. There is this perception that, it needs to be done right. And what I've learned over the years is, yes, there's a time for perfectionism, but there's also a time to say, you know what, it's more important we get this moving and get it going and then fix or reiterate along the way instead of worrying about being perfect out of the gate. Because that really slows a lot of companies down too, is they spend all their time trying to make it just so. and never a time actually producing. So
Yes.
it's really about changing that methodology.
Yeah, for sure. I like to call it move fast and break things.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah, that's my mentality, you know. And actually, I'm building two separate startups currently right now, so
Okay.
I'm a bit exhausted. You know, and I got the podcast going too as well. So it's really good to again get the chance to talk to you and learn a little bit from your experience and stuff like that because yeah, one of the projects now I'm building is a NFT audiobook and podcasting platform, and
Okay.
I'm building another platform too as well with another business partner. He's the majority, well, he's not the majority owner, but he's a CTO, and then there's also the CEO. I'm on the CMO, and we're building a blockchain logistics B2B documentation store solution.
Oh,
And
cool.
yeah, so basically learning basically all working together with a team is easy when you have people that all have a similar mindset to you, but it's
Correct.
hard when, you know, like I said, I know I want to get to it later, but maybe we could talk to it about it now about
Sure.
how do you make everything synergize and what do you
How
get
much
add
time do we
incentives?
have here? Is this a day-long podcast?
If
Um, sure, I can jump into that.
yeah,
You know,
please.
the biggest challenge, as you point out, in most companies is there isn't a clear understanding by all parties of what the vision is, what the expected outcomes are, and in my mind, probably the most important thing, what the values are. You know, you've probably gone through strategic planning before. You're familiar with vision, mission, values. Everyone focuses on the vision because the vision
Yes.
is the fancy thing that you put on the wall that you tell people that's what makes you great. Um, I argue it's the opposite. It's the values are really what differentiates the business. It's also that synergy you were talking about that's the glue that holds everyone together. Because what the
Mhm.
values do is they dictate what you will do and what you won't do to achieve your goal. And if you
Mhm.
think about where most disconnects happen in business, it's not that people are intentionally doing the wrong things. They're doing things that misalign with the values. They're doing what they believe is the right thing to do to get the result that you want. But it, as
Mhm.
you point out, it might take them down a different path or take them out of sync with what really the leaders are looking at doing. So I
Yeah.
spend a lot of time with businesses that are, you know, running into this situation where maybe the staff isn't doing what they're supposed to be doing, or they're not as productive as they're supposed to be, or there's high turnover, et cetera, et cetera. And it really boils down to, do the people align with what your goal is? And in most
Mhm.
cases, when you talk to the staff, they don't even know what it is. You know, they have a broad idea based on what the business structure is and what the product or service is, but they really don't understand the impact of that and how the way you do things is going to differentiate you from what other companies of similar stature are doing.
Yeah.
So that's where really spending time on the values. And I explain values is, you know, it's not so much a word as it could be a statement or a story that supports a unique idea. So when we talk about, you know, a lot of people might talk about honesty, integrity, quality, customer service, and they utilize those as values. But what really do they mean? I'm sure if I told you customer service, you have a certain idea in your head of what great customer service is. But if I ask 10 other people, I'm going to get 10 other answers. So
Mhm.
it's really aligning what that idea is, what that thought is, and turning it into something that is a unified message that everyone understands. So that not only is the wording, it's now, what does that wording mean to us as a company?
Mhm.
And here's an example of how it's used when we're successful doing it, when we are not successful doing it. And then it's hammering those things day in, day out on every situation you have in the organization. So it's when we talk values, it's like the vision. Everyone spends time creating it. They're very proud. They stand up, clap their hands, pat themselves. They put it on the wall and they tell everyone, okay, memorize this and we're going to live by these things. And then what happens the next day? The next day you go back to doing what you were doing before you even talked about the mission, vision, values. So that's where really you need to, it's a change process. You need to change your mindset. You need to change your actions to really produce the desired result that you're getting. And it requires constant repetition. There are things that we will talk about in this conversation today that people will listen to, and you can talk to them tomorrow and see how much they regurgitate. Roughly, if you're lucky, maybe they'll get 50% of the ideas down. You go forward one more day, it's going to be 25% of the ideas. You go forward 2 weeks, they'll be lucky to remember my name. And that's just the nature of how people are. We learn through repetition, and it's that constant repeat action that really gets us to absorb the information that's being put out there. And, the easiest way I can relate to that is, I'm not going to abuse anybody by pointing out a song that they might hate, but there are certain songs that you hear over and over and over again, and you could absolutely despise them, but I guarantee you'll know every words to the lyrics because you've heard them so often. And that's just an example of how spaced repetition works on our mindset. And if we apply this to workplace culture and apply this to change process, this is where we really start making a difference in how people perform. It's not going to happen overnight, but over the course of weeks and months, you can really start making incremental changes to the positive.
When you look at hiring and you see, okay, this person's very skilled, but I don't know if they have that motivation, or this person's very motivated and maybe they're not that skilled, maybe they're coachable. What do you think is the better prototype to hire when you're, having these two instances of people that you can determine to hire?
110% of the time, I will hire attitude over skill any day. What I find is there are some very skilled people out there, very talented people who have terrible attitudes. And I, as a leader who have had to deal with those people, find that I waste a ton of time trying to fix the attitude for the sake of getting a productive person. And the other thing you have to realize is, while somebody might have a lot of skills and be very productive, their work and their attitude impact all the other people you have working around them. So you could have a highly productive person that is actually lowering the productivity of the people they're surrounded with because of how they treat others, how they talk to others, how they work as a team. Do they play nice in the sandbox? Yeah. I've seen some very skilled people play very poorly in the sandbox and actually deprive other workers of their ability to do their job. So then you got to ask yourself, well, if you have 10 people, you have one stellar worker with a poor attitude, and you've got 9 other people that now can't perform their work. Have you really benefited anything? You really haven't. So for me, I'll take that attitude, that go get them approach, and I'll work with them all day long, because my job as a leader isn't to do their job. My job is to help make them successful and get the obstacles out of their way. And if one of the obstacles is they do not know the skill sets as well, then my job as a leader is to help coach and teach them those skills to get them up to speed. And if you do that leads to employee retention, because again, you have the right person with the right attitude. They're now getting support. Support is something most people don't see in a company. They get tossed in a seat and they get told, here's the project you do, go build widgets or go do the service stuff and leave me alone unless there's a problem. Yeah. So it's that approach that really is going to change things.
When you look at the differences and nuances between generation and generation, like I'm a millennial, and I promised myself when I was younger that I would never be one of those get off my lawn type of older people. And
we all turn into them, just so you know.
It's terrible, man. It's terrible. So when I look at the Zoomers, is why they call them Gen Z, which is a generation below mine's, which they've been fully immersed in the internet. Like by the time they were like 7, I mean, they all had like smartphones, whereas me, I didn't get the smartphone until I was 18.
Okay.
So it's a little bit different for me because I grew up basically my whole entire pre-adult life without, the smartphone, whereas they're just fully immersed in it before preteen stage, And my thing is, I'm noticing that there's a shift happening with like quiet quitting. I don't know if you're familiar with that term.
I am very familiar with that term. I think I've even wrote a couple articles and did a couple of, I can't remember if we talked about it on our podcast, but I think there was a subject around quiet quitting at one point.
Yeah, I get it from their perspective, kind of, but I kind of don't get it. And I just think it's as a business, should you just avoid Zoomers like in totality?
Well, that's going to be hard to do at some point, because remember, every generation ages out of the workforce. And that's part of, some of the situation we're having right now is we're seeing, with the last kind of, I'll call it downturn, But we went through something in 2019 through about 2021, 2022, and a lot of people that were kind of in their late 50s, early 60s said, "Up, I'm out. Get me out of here. I'm done." Well, what's happened is you've now seen 30, 40 years of experience walk out the door, never to return. Now you have, as you point out, the Zoomers coming up, and they're moving into the workforce where there's already more jobs than there are people. That's what makes this economy so weird right now is we don't have enough people to fill skilled positions, and we probably won't for several decades. And the way population trends are going, we might never fully turn that around. Now we can talk about how AI and other stuff influences that, but ultimately there's always going to be a need for people for something. And that's a much longer theoretical discussion too, but maybe for a later date. But you still have to get, people need to feel productive. They need to feel like they have purpose. Some of the challenges we have with the Gen Z is, as you point out, social media. Social media was a very new thing back in 2007, 2008. And I was one of the early adopters, even though my age should not suggest it. I had a few friends and colleagues that were getting heavy into social media. So I started understanding it fairly early. And I'll tell you right now, it's gone way past my capabilities in a lot of ways. But it's, as you pointed out, most of these kids grew up with a cell phone and smartphone in their hand, where, a lot of us grew up on flip phones if we had a phone, at all. My daughter was very similar. We had a computer in her room by the age of 3. And she could program the computer well by probably the age of 7 or 8. So, she learned on technology, and at the time we thought that was the right thing to do. Now I fast forward, of course, that meant she got involved in social media early, and the social media really paints, I believe, an unrealistic picture for especially the Gen Zs of what life is actually like, because they tend to see everyone's highlight reel. I mean, that's really what social media is. You share the best points in your life, you don't share the worst. And that's very common trait as well. So what you see is, you might see somebody who portrays that they're extremely successful and that they're knocking it out of the park on everything. You don't really know what's going on behind the scenes, but that's what's showing up on your screen. Well, again, your friends or your followers now see that, they want to emulate that. And they believe that it might not take hard work to accomplish a lot of these things. And I think that's where, as you kind of pointed out, that the Gen Z mentality has kind of like, well, I should be an expert on day one. It shouldn't take me 5 to 10 years to build the skills to make me successful at what I do. And the reality is, there is no shortcut. There is no matrix where somebody can plug a rod in the back of our head and download information, and all of a sudden we know it. We have to go through the process. We have to try, we have to fail, we have to back up, we have to try again. And that's really how we gain the skills for our growth.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And, it's very interesting because actually I was having a conversation with one of my brothers, and he's actually older than me, but
Okay.
he's very new to the internet. And I'm trying to explain to him that, hey, building a website doesn't mean that you're just going to get traffic.
Exactly.
I'm like, that's just step one, of like many other steps that you have to do. You need to build a funnel. You need to understand SEO. And, for them, I feel like even with him, he became a little bit of a victim of just scrolling on a timeline and maybe seeing someone being able to do it, or hearing someone else being able to do it, but not understanding that, hey, because he tried to give an example of another person who's also running a similar business that's successful. But I'm like, hey, they have 30,000 followers that they're leveraging, for a funnel,
Yep.
And I'm like, you don't have a personal brand. Are you going to be running Google ads? Are you going to be running Facebook ads? How are you going to acquire the clientele to bring them to the website so then they can then book an appointment for that service that you want to, And I think people don't think that far because they see the 30-second TikTok and then they equate that to, okay, it shouldn't take that long. This is simple. I do this, and this, and then I get rich in like 6 months.
And for most people, it takes years to build enough of a following that it can actually be monetized. It's not an overnight thing. I mean,
Yes.
there's always a few examples of where somebody just did the right thing at the right time for the right reasons, and for whatever reason it took off. But the vast majority of us, we aren't blessed with either that level of charisma or luck and skill combined to produce that. Plus, I don't know how many millions of websites there are out there now, but that's your competition. Is while technology has made it much easier and much less expensive for smaller businesses to compete, it's also made it much more difficult, because back, I'm going to date myself now, 30, 40 years ago, when really, if you were a shop in a small town, your audience was that small town. Well, now that shop in that small town could have a web page, they could have a shopping cart, they could have an eBay presence, they could have all this stuff, and now they're selling to people all around the world. Well, it's great that company can do that, but guess what? So can everybody else. So your competition has amped up 1,000-fold.
Exactly.
And this is, again, kind of back to the values and everything. Where do you differentiate yourself? Well, if the widget's the same, you can't do that. So then it comes down to, again, as you pointed, what's going on in your head, what makes you unique, what values, what principles, what actions are going to differentiate you from what other people are doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, when I look at the landscape, because of this technology making it more accessible for information, decentralizing sort of information flows, it makes it easier for people to then accelerate the process. It also did added value of Chat GPT and AI, and all these different AI products are coming out.
Yep.
We've never had a solution that sort of helps streamlines the process and makes it almost the cost to zero for labor and for intellect. So now you can cut those costs down, and you can start a business and basically copy someone else's business relatively quickly. And it's only going to get quicker and quicker and quicker over the course of time. So I actually think that a way to differentiate yourself currently right now is through content marketing.
Oh, agreed. Yeah.
And I look at the landscape of the internet, and I've made this thesis several times before in my podcast. My listeners, they know about it. But for you, I'm just going to break it down, because I'm really, really adamant of content, because I see that there's 5 billion people on the internet currently right now, and that number is projected to grow to around 90 to 95% of people by 2030. So within the next 7 years, we'll almost have the entire world on the internet, because they're building out internet infrastructure with WMT, Starlink, and these types of companies that are solving this problem. And so that means there's going to be an increase of clientele that are coming onto the internet. And if you've been compounding your authority by pushing content from, let's say, this year up until 2030, you're going to have a strategic advantage over someone who just started posting content at 2030, towards the peak of that, where the new clients come on. And it also ties into another theory that I had in regards to cloud and cloud computing, cloud services, and cybersecurity. I think a lot of the people that are going to be on board on the internet are going to be firing up e-commerce stores. And because of that, there's going to be, AWS, Alphabet, and Microsoft Azure. These guys there's going to be an increase of demand for cybersecurity specialists, because they're going to have to increase the amount of cloud storage they have to provide the services for those e-commerce platforms, right? And so I think these two areas are a huge area of focus. I think when it comes to cloud and data, and also content, too, as well. But I don't know what you think about this theory.
I agree with you on a lot of that. I was also, as you were talking, thinking about a conversation I had a couple of days ago with a banker friend of mine, and the banking industry is going through a massive shift right now. And it's not just, digital currency like Bitcoin and everything else. The actual Fed is changing how money can be transferred from one bank to the next. Essentially, it's going to speed up the process and remove a lot of the roadblocks that there are to moving money back and forth. So you're going to, as you point out, you might see things like Visa and MasterCard, for example, which have been the primary gateways for moving money around. They might essentially become obsolete. Things like Venmo, for example, because as he pointed out, Venmo takes money, moves it to an app, and then from the app moves it to the person that you're transferring the money to. Well, the whole point of the Fed is to eliminate that middleman. So that then moves it to the point where money can instantly be transferred from one person to the next. As he pointed out, we were having lunch at the time. He said, I could give you $10 you could then walk across the street and that money would be readily available in your bank account immediately. You could withdraw it within a matter of seconds from when I transfer it to you, where typically, the case is now where most people transfer money through untraditional means like Venmo. You move that money into your Venmo app, then that money moves to the other user. And a lot of times that takes several days to transfer because Venmo is busy making money on your money. And that's why a lot of those services are free, because they'll hold on to your money for a couple of days. Well, you might not think of it's a lot if it's $10, $20, whatever it might be, but you multiply that times, several million users, all of a sudden you've got quite a pile of money that is being transferred back and forth. And making even a couple percent interest on that is some pretty good cash. And he told me that there's about $1 trillion that they believe are sitting in cash-based apps like that. That are just being held by those companies. So that's a lot of cash flow that is being held in those areas. So that's part of the reason where the banking system is trying to change all that.
Yeah, for sure. And I look at, I think we're entering the exponential growth phase of technological advancements. And I see that we are moving towards frictionless payments, right?
Correct.
And also a little bit more, it's going to be easier because if you look at it now, you look at there's some big, huge companies now that don't even have a brick and mortar, right?
Right.
So everything like billion-dollar companies that don't even have a brick and mortar at all, don't even have a headquarters, And I think we're transferring into this digital age where everything's going to move quicker. And because of that, you're going to have an increase exponentially of how money is transferred. And so I think it's going to stimulate the economy even faster, because if I can get my money faster, then I can move it faster into another business, right? Either for paying for a product or service. And so I'm very curious to see how things are going to turn out within the next 4 to 5 years and who the winners and losers are going to be, because also the decentralized sort of platforms that are also building too as well, these decentralized apps and blockchain technology, and are sort of trying to decentralize these conglomerates from controlling everything. And it all depends on who's going to trust what, because when you look at the government, they're starting to lose a little bit of trust is what I'm noticing. And
exactly.
I'm not entirely sure if they're going to be able to replicate the model that they had previously digitally in a more faster, streamlined process. And they're going to be able to convince millions of people to do so, because this sort of situation they have now, because if you look at the idea of fiat currency, right? And you see, for instance, let's say, for instance, okay, I'm a guy, I'm making 6 figures a year, and I'm able to keep some of that wealth through savings and through investments. And then people at the top just decide at a certain point in time, just, hey, we're going to print money. And so now the percentage of wealth that I control is now, as a subsequent effect, less than it was. And so now I have to produce more to keep up with that rate of them printing money. And so I end up losing. And also, to even compound this, there's only a small portion of people that get the added value of knowing the information before everyone else does.
Right.
And so, yeah.
There's going to be some challenges there. One of our biggest challenges we're going to face with a lot of this is it's still a little bit wild, wild west. The biggest issue relating back to that conversation I had a couple days ago, the main concern from the banking industry is fraud. And I think that's true of all of these things, whether it's blockchain or whatever it might be, is, there's that, as you point out, frictionless ability to move money from one to the next. But there's also a certain level of risk with that, because as we know, for as secure as we can build something, there's somebody else that's looking to break through that security and take advantage of it. Yeah, so now absolutely. you take the example where, okay, I can transfer money to you that maybe I didn't get through a legitimate source. You have that money instantly. You can withdraw that money. How does somebody get made whole once that fraud is uncovered? And that's really, I think, where if this is anything you're working on, try and figure this out. But how do you protect, again, the individual from the risk of losing everything as we move to kind of a more digital currency society? The other challenge that, I think that you're looking at there with moving away from fiat currency is we have for eons assigned value based off of governments. I mean, that's really what fiat currency is. I believe it started initially in China way back thousands of years ago, where they were kind of the first ones to develop fiat currency, where coins and stuff were passed.
Yeah.
But that, as you read on the U.S., that dollar is backed by the full faith and credit of the U.S. government. And at this point, that is the world's currency, because you can basically trade that money almost anywhere, and that money is going to be good for something. The challenge we need to run into as a country is, of course, controlling the interest rates and the constant printing of more money, because that's really kind of what's happening right now. And that's going to be the hardest thing to deal with, because even as we start transferring the concept of creating value out of something else, well, that's probably the hardest thing about Bitcoin or anything else. The value still ties to a fiat currency. That's where you get the value for Bitcoin. How does Bitcoin become value in and of itself? Well, that value is going to be transferred to whatever currency, whether it's the British pound, whether it's the US dollar, whether it's the Chinese yuan. It's going to transfer to that, and it still becomes a situation where we're transferring based off of those fiat currency models. So it's going to be, in my opinion, the technology is good, but it's going to be a little bit more challenging to say, how does this thing have a unique intrinsic value all by itself?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very interesting point. I look at beyond the US, I kind of expand to like more of the global entire macro perspective. And I look at, for instance, if you look at, countries that are in Africa, where a lot of the people, individuals don't have a bank account and they don't trust the banking sector. And for them, it makes sense to, instead of hold cash where, you could get robbed, to have something stored in a digital wallet. And more people have smartphones now than ever before. And it makes sense to then just be able to transfer the money. It also cuts down on time, because imagine you need to pay a bill, but you don't have a bank. So you need to you need to go all the way to the bank, wait in line, you waste all that time. But imagine you could just send them Bitcoin, and it kind of solves and streamlines that process for even people at a smaller scale, and also giving those people also access to decentralized finance, so that they can, put their Bitcoin up or crypto up as collateral, and then borrow against it to scale their businesses. And they've been, for a long period of time, been a little bit sort of neglected from the entire financial sector globally. And I think that this financial instrument, in cryptocurrency, is something that can streamline the process for people to have access to global liquidity. And it's something that's never been available before to them. And when you look at their governments, offering 20, 30, 40% interest rates, and you look at Argentina, what other solution do you have? Imagine you're going to work, you went to work the entire month, you get your check, and your check is now worth 10% than what it was worth at the beginning of the month because of hyperinflation. So I think there's obviously a lot of kinks and stuff to look at, but when you look at the actual, if you are looking at it from, Bitcoin trade against the dollar, there's actually sort of like an inverse correlation between them both. Because Bitcoin started at zero, and now it's, $35,000 right now.
Sure.
And so it's actually, the dollar is actually losing value against Bitcoin, in the long term. But I think what it is the short-term volatility swings, but that differs also depending on which currency you're looking at to trade. If you're talking about Argentinian pesos, well, Bitcoin just hit an all-time high in Argentinian pesos.
Exactly.
So
but then what does that mean? So, that's, I think, the challenge that we're going to run into here is this, there's going to be governmental currency. I think there's always going to be something there, because the government is trying to figure out right now, right? Whether it's the US or, China's had the big push for the digital yuan. So they're trying to figure out how to create their own Bitcoin to offset Bitcoin as well. There's also regulation issues and again, that's going to be worldwide. Is everyone from a governmental side is going to want to try and control it to make it taxable, because of course the taxes feed the government, which then feeds whatever they're doing with that money. It's going to be interesting to see how I don't want to say get around that, but how the two work in conjunction with each other, and basically keep our economies going. That's really what it
Yeah.
boils down to.
Absolutely. And also, I look at it too from this perspective. When I look at the introduction of potential like CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, like from different governments and stuff that are creating this, leveraging the blockchain,
Mm-hmm.
it is a good solution, I guess, to streamline the process if you can build trust with the government. But also, I look at the fact that, okay, if I'm exporting goods and services to then, okay, say for instance, in this example, I have a cup and I'm a Kenyan guy that's trying to sell something to some guy in Italy. Okay, what currency are we using as the medium of exchange? If you don't have Kenyan shillings and I don't have euros, how do we
Right.
then trade? And then also, if we use your euros there or CBDC, what's to stop you from one day being pissed off at me and then pressing a button like the US did to Russia, right? So,
Exactly. Yep.
so I look at Bitcoin as sort of that mediation, right?
Yeah.
Because it's a decentralized solution that no one controls, everyone can join, and we could trade freely with that on a macro scale if the CBDCs do get introduced from country to country. Because I just see there's too much counterparty risk to hold, cash reserves of CBDC US dollars. If you just see what they
Oh,
did to,
agreed. Yeah.
yeah, so I think as a country, it's too much counterparty risk. So I see Bitcoin as the alternative solution for everyone to uniformly agree upon to trade. But I don't know what you think about that.
Hey bro, I'm just trolling is something that will not just challenge your perspective, but also touch your heart and soul. It's a book that defies convention, blending art and literature into a thought-provoking masterpiece. A reflective piece of provocative art that tackles societal constructs from angles you've never considered. Hey bro, I'm just trolling delves into the very essence of our existence. It questions the technology that surrounds us, challenges our notions of beauty, stares unflinchingly into the eyes of death, and questions the boundaries of freedom. It scrutinized the educational system that molds our very future. This book is a journey, an exploration of shared human experience, and it's a work of art that refuses to be confined by tradition. It's a canvas painted with words, a melody of thought, and a testament to the power of creativity in a world dominated by algorithms and data. Visit moonboycapitalventures.com and get your hands on Hey Bro, I'm Just Trolling today. It's not just a book, it's a movement. Now let's jump back into the show.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of positives towards Bitcoin and
Yeah,
other cryptocurrency. Right now, I would say Bitcoin's probably the standard that you're going with.
right.
But of course, there's others that are trying to create a similar methodology or process using blockchain.
Yeah,
As anything, it's going to be interesting to see what's going to win or how it's going to win out.
yeah.
I've kind of watched from afar, and I admit now I'm showing my age because trying to understand digital currency sometimes has me scratching my head. I get the concept, but then it's like, okay, I'm still stuck in the mindset that, whether it's British pounds, whether it's Chinese yuan, whether it's dollars, whether it's francs, whatever it might be, it still kind of seems to boil down to that. But I think as we figure this out, it's almost like going back to the trading or bartering method in some ways.
Yeah.
It's kind of a more advanced form of that.
Mhm.
And for smaller businesses, it's going to become, as you point out, a bigger opportunity
Mhm.
because small companies, or your example of the Kenyan trying to sell a mug to somebody in Italy,
Mhm.
this provides them with a potential opportunity to do so
Mhm.
that would have been a lot less cost effective even just a few short years ago. So still trying to wrestle my head around, what's going to be the tipping point that's going to push it over the edge and make this of mass appeal, or a bigger thing. And it really might come down to just some of the conflicts that are going on right now and some of the uncertainty that's going on. I think that's where people are starting to look at things like Bitcoin, blockchain, and other cryptocurrencies to see how they can hedge their bets, if you will,
Mhm.
against their own currency. Because I know if you look at the U.S. dollar, is probably devalued by almost as much as 50% in just the last 2 years with everything that's
Yes.
been going on. And it
Mhm.
gets a little scary when, you go to the grocery store and what you used to spend $100 on is now about $200.
Yeah.
And it's going to impact people, especially of lower income or lower means. And as our goal should be, how do we move people out of poverty situations? How do we move them into where they can support themselves, make a living? I think utopia says you can do it for everybody. The reality is you can't do it for everybody because, again, once you raise the bar for everybody, well, that just pushes everything else up higher.
Exactly.
But can you give people the opportunity? And that's what I'm about, freedom of opportunity to build their own enterprise, build their own lifestyle, make themselves successful. And again, it boils down to work and effort and ingenuity and a lot of luck, because timing and just, hitting things at the right time can make a huge difference on whether you're successful or not.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that's something, I know my generation is pretty bad, but I just think the Zoomers for me are just, I don't want to too much get on them, but I just feel like
Sure.
I don't see them in regards to work ethic, being able to, pick themselves on their bootstraps and, grind. I don't think they're ready for
It's
that.
going to be tougher. And it really started with your generation. I'm not going to pick on you.
No, it's true. It's true.
But again, I'm an Xer. So I'm in my mid 50s. I was the latchkey kid.
Yeah.
You basically had to take care of yourself from the time you could walk. And I wasn't in a situation where it was that bad, but I grew up on a farm. Well, growing up on a farm is a different lifestyle than growing up in the city. You have chores to do. You have animals that you need to take care of. You have crops you need to attend to. It's a 24/7 gig. And guess what? Growing up on a farm, who's your hired hand? Well, mom and dad created the hired hands. They're doing the work. So you start building this work ethic. But, I was also kind of at the tail end of agriculture here. And as you know, more people have moved to the city, and of course there are more white collar jobs and blue collar jobs, and you start seeing this mindset change. And it really started happening with the millennials. When I was a kid, the focus was on work and getting the job done, and that's what brought value. And then you had free time, because you weren't on the farm anymore, and the parents were making more money. You got to go to soccer practice, you got to go to karate practice, baseball, basketball. There was always something for the kids to do that didn't involve them kind of occupying their own time. I mean, when I was bored, my parents would say, well, you got two choices. You can go out and work, or you can go find something to do. That's it. If I am not going to create an opportunity for you to, fill your time, you're going to have to do it yourself. And I'll tell you where we prefer to fill it. There's hay to move. There's poop to shovel. There's all that stuff. So you learn to occupy yourself, whether it be hunting, fishing, hiking. There were things you did to fill your time. Well, here's the bad part of technology and social media. That's now filled our time. And that's where you started seeing it with the millennials, and more so, as you point out, with Gen Z, where now the digital world occupies almost 100% of their time. They don't go out and try to figure out how to, stimulate themselves mentally, because they have this screen in front of them that provides them with the dopamine hit of a funny or stupid video, or a video that causes rage, or a statement, or a friend that is in Spain on vacation. You're wondering why you can't be there. That's what this has turned into. And to me, that's where social media has kind of the dichotomy of it's probably one of the best things that has ever happened. It's also probably one of the worst things that's ever happened. It's allowed me to connect to people like you all over the world, where in the past that would have been virtually impossible. But the negative side of that is this also enveloped our entire lives and kind of sucked us in. And I admit, even now I can get caught where I'm just scrolling on a screen, and it's like, well, why am I doing this? There's much more valuable stuff I could be doing right now. But that's where technology is. And to me, that's probably the most scary or concerning thing, is while we've created all these tools to make our lives better and more entertaining, we've also essentially taken away the ambition to go do anything else, and then replaced it with the expectation that is, well, if it's Field of Dreams. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie, but if you build it, they will come. So if you just create this thing. If I believe that I should be a TikTok star, for example, well, I should create 2 videos and I should have 10 billion followers almost immediately because that's how good I am.
Yeah.
And we can sit here and laugh about it because, we know what effort it takes to put in just to even get a smattering of a following.
Yes.
But there are kids out there that believe that, well, if they can do that silly, stupid thing, I can do a silly, stupid thing, and I can be just as good as they are. And that's what we're going to continue to run into for the next several decades, is this mindset that it should just come to me naturally.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the long-term approach is withering away, unfortunately. A good thing that helped me protect myself and my mindset, my drive, was 2 things. One, I deleted my social media back in 2014,
Good
and
for
all
you.
of it. And I only got back on recently because of building a personal brand,
Right.
you know?
Right.
And so that, and also I joined the army. So these 2 things really, really helped me shape and form my discipline throughout my adulthood, for sure.
Well, the military will definitely give you discipline, and it will give you a mission, and it will build values. It will also create work ethic because there's no way to get around it if you're in the Army, Navy, Air Force, any of those. So good for you. That is a difference maker there. Unfortunately, we have fewer people going into the military. We have fewer and fewer people that are in positions or jobs where they do see that they have to work to build their skills. I mean, I work a lot with construction industry. So the trades, you got welding, you've got plumbing, electrical. They're really struggling to get people now. And whether or not you want to start a business, not everyone's cut out to be a business owner, but if you want to make a good living, the easiest thing to do right now would be to go in the trades in high school, because you can get training in high school that speeds up your apprenticeship out of high school. And in every situation like that, you're getting paid to learn. So you're actually getting paid to do the job while you're learning the job. And then once you move up into the master level, where now, where the really big money is made, you're getting paid along the way. Where you go to college, it's the opposite. You're paying upwards of $30,000 to $50,000 to $100,000 a year, depending upon where you're going, to get a degree that no longer provides a guarantee that you're going to make the money to pay off that degree. And again, this is further discussion for another day, but we all see what the cost of education has become and how the government has essentially monetized that as another tax tool for them through the student loan process, which is putting many kids who don't understand the value of money and how to work with money into a situation where they'll never be out of debt for their entire life. And that to me is sad, because I went to school at a time when school was affordable. The value of the education you got actually produced a result. You got your money back and then some. But we're just seeing things change so much. And I forget how much. I think there's been a 9-fold increase over, what education costs are versus the inflation rate for the past 30 years. And that's really what's getting these kids. And we don't teach money methods in high school anymore. There's no, most people don't have a checkbook. So, back to the digital currency thing or Venmo or whatever you're using, most kids know how to use a credit card before they know how to write a check. And to me, it's simple things like that keep the finances in front of you, so you can see how money moves about and what you need to do to earn money, and then how quickly that money goes away for other expenses. And we just need to start in grade school and middle school to teach these kids the value of money and how to manage money and what it means to, again, whether or not you're a business owner. To me, that doesn't matter, because we're always going to need people who are going to do a job and won't care about being that business owner. But at the same point, we should be looking at ways that they're able to make a very good living based off of what they're doing. And really the way the population is going, we will have more than enough people to fill, or, we won't have enough people to fill these jobs that are skilled jobs that require a bit of talent before you can really make a lot of money doing it. So if you're willing to put forth the effort, that's going to be the key. And as you point out, Gen Z is looking past where I got to get my hands dirty to how can I create that TikTok video and make my $1 million.
Exactly. And it's what, because I actually did a podcast I'm dropping on Veterans Day with actually a captain and a staff sergeant within the Army,
Mm,
to talk about, because the Army is losing a lot in retention, like they're not getting enough soldiers.
yes.
And I think part of the reason is because the Zoomers, my generation also included too as well, but mainly the Zoomers, because the Army targeted younger people.
Yep.
There's a lot of them that are not in shape, right? And
Correct.
also they're looking. It's not sexy, right? The sexy thing
Right.
to do is to be a content creator, right? So they
Yes.
don't want to go into trade. They don't want to go into the Army, and also because of the internet, there's so much different ways now to make money that it kind of surpasses the wages in which the Army is paying currently too as well. So it's partly an Army problem too as well. But I think also part of the reason is that it's lowered in terms of retention is because of the marketing, right? The marketing
Right.
has changed into this, oh, let's join hands and, kumbaya. And the Army
Exactly.
it's meant for, it's gladiators, man,
Yeah, it's anything but that, right? And that's where the military really, the idea of joining the military is you're fighting for a greater cause, essentially.
Yes.
That's the
Yes.
reason. And if you look back to the ads from the 80s and even into the 90s until we got kind of into the 2000, well, even in the early 2000s, the whole
Mhm.
point of joining the military was you are going to be a driving force in creating a better world. It's really what it
Yes.
boiled down to. Now, how you did
Mhm.
that might be of argument or consternation to some people, but that's really what it was about. Because if you looked at the videos, they were about humanitarian aid, protecting people or protecting people in a situation where they wouldn't normally have somebody on their side. And I truly believe that as there's a lot of things that the U.S. could do better. Uh, there still is a lot in our military that is good.
Yeah.
And the challenge is they need to get back to that unified vision and that purpose, because people need purpose. They need something to work towards.
Mhm.
Otherwise, what else have they got? They've got nothing. And that's what leads to the situations that we have right now is we are failing to help people define their purpose in a way that's productive and constructive. And you see it in a number of ways acting out in the news media, because if you don't have a purpose will find you. And if the
Mhm.
purpose finds you, it's usually not the one that society wants. It leads to violence, it leads to war, it leads to all sorts of other things. So
Yeah.
that's really where part of what my job is, to help provide guidance and help create that sense of purpose. It's microscopic as is in a business, and it's usually with that business owner and their employees. But that's really what I see is lacking, and especially in these companies that can't keep employees. There's no sense of purpose there. So why should you
Yeah.
stick around if there's nothing to fulfill you mentally?
Exactly. Absolutely. I wanted to shift over and talk a little bit about your book because I saw that you did come out with a book. Can you just a little bit break it down, what it was about, and why you decided to write it?
Sure. The book is called Apples to Apples. Basically, it's about how to differentiate yourself from your competition.
Mhm.
So I use the concept of, we always do the apples to apples comparison, like versus like. Well, in the business world, that's the last thing you want, because when you're compared like versus like, then what's your differentiator? It comes down to price. And
Yes.
the problem is, the bottom line is, if we race to the bottom as far as price goes, everyone's a loser eventually,
Yes.
because things get so cheap, it's no longer affordable to produce them. And then we
Mhm.
lose that opportunity for that good or service.
Yes.
So the idea here was to highlight companies and techniques that you can use as a business owner to really start figuring out what makes you unique. And as we talked about, it goes back to the values, it goes back to the driving force of your culture, and how you lead, and how you provide that service for that product, or that service, whatever you're doing, to really make a difference. And it's just basically covering the steps on how to do that. So I tried to create a little bit of a how-to book so people could actually use it kind of as a roadmap, and it would give them some kind of quick tools to use.
Mhm.
Hopefully at some point they realize that they need some assistance doing that, they'll give me a call. But ultimately, yeah, that was the purpose of the book.
Man, it's amazing. It's amazing because like we talked about previously, because again, I have another brother, and
We all have a brother, though.
yeah, and we were discussing because he was trying to scale up his personal brand,
Sure.
and he's like, yeah, when I get to 1K subs on my YouTube, I'm going to launch a merchandise, for people to buy and stuff like that, and clothing brand. And I'm like, that sounds great, but I'm like, why should people buy from you if it doesn't benefit people? What is the reason that they're buying from you specifically? And I think they don't really think again from that broad perspective of the differentiating factor, because it's oversaturated. The clothing brand
Oh
market,
yeah.
it's
If I
super
want to start
oversaturated.
this t-shirt line, I could start a t-shirt line. Doesn't mean anyone's going to buy a t-shirt from me.
Exactly. Who are you gonna? Are you reaching out to KOLs? Who's sponsoring it? How are you gonna
Yep.
advertise? What's your target market? Like these types of things. How are you gonna funnel them? Like it's these are things I think that people don't think about, because again, they've never actually built something from scratch. I'm on my second and third time doing it with my two startups that I'm doing now. So people have never built anything from scratch, and it just takes time, and you have to be patient and not think that's going to be an overnight success. But I think with constant pursuit and relentlessness, you can get to that point of like, okay, I'm finally starting to gain some traction. I'm finally starting to learn how to market. I'm finally building my funnels correctly. I'm working on strategic partnerships. These sorts of elements is what separates you and differentiates you in the market. And I think a lot of people, they don't really understand. They can't really comprehend that. You've been in business for what, 20 something odd years, right?
Well, if you count the other companies I've worked for, I've been in the business world for over 30, almost 35 years. I've been doing this since 2005, so we're quickly approaching 20 years doing this. And there have been many failures along the way. I tried
Mhm.
everything from web development to photography to marketing to
Mhm.
whatnot. Failed often. Unfortunately,
Mhm.
didn't always fail cheap. So the rule is now is, try something, try it at a reasonable investment, but only put that investment at a further level once you start making traction. Because I think a lot of people, they think they've got their $1 million idea. They throw all their life savings into it only to find out that they're going down the wrong path. I remember talking with somebody several years ago who, at this time I had an office in China, and Chinese relationships with the U.S. were quite different. And, many companies were looking to find different ways to expand or partner with companies in China. And anyway, he created this mobile bike. Well, the concept in mind was a good idea. Create
Mhm.
something that could be folded up and carried with you, and you could travel somewhere with it. So if you hop on a bus, you can take the bike with you, you can get off, unfold it, and away you
Mhm.
go. Well, the problem was he had invested $200,000 to $300,000 in a concept where the bike was actually in two pieces. The total
Hmm.
kit weighed about 30 or 40 pounds.
Hmm.
So it wasn't really as mobile as it was. And
Yeah.
he explained to me all this money he put into it, and that the fact that it was going to be successful. And I had to be the hard truth to say, the idea, while it might be good, the execution is not. And all this money you invested, you got to convince somebody now that they need to buy a bike that comes in two pieces, in two satchels, and then they're going to carry around. Then they're going to take 3 to 5 minutes to put it together. And oh, by the way, that bike's going to weigh about 40 pounds. So you're going to be lugging this all over hell. It's no more convenient than if I have a full size sports bike that, weighs maybe 19 pounds that I can throw on my shoulder and walk around. Yes, it's going to be
Mhm.
awkward,
Yeah.
but you're kind of in the same situation here. So same yet different. And I think that's what, people fail to realize, is sometimes your good idea isn't that good.
Mm.
And if you invest all your money in it and you find out after the fact, well, there's nobody to blame but yourself. And unfortunately, then you get to start all over again. And now on
Exactly.
top of it, you have to try and build up that wealth or that investment to get back to square one.
Yeah, absolutely. What would you say is your like one of your most favorite industries to work in that you've worked in over the past years?
I have worked in virtually every industry over the last 20 years. As you can see, I'm wearing a polo shirt now. I used to be dress shirt and tie and dress slacks. I love working with people that like getting their hands dirty. I think that goes back to my agricultural background, growing up on a farm. To
Mm-hmm.
me, it's more enjoyable because I think, as we've talked about earlier in this session, those people have a mindset. They understand work ethic. They understand what it takes to actually get the job done and be successful. Sometimes they've been successful in spite of themselves. They
Mm-hmm.
hit the right market at the right time for the right reason. So luck played a lot into it, and then boom, is
Mm-hmm.
making money. But then there's all these bad habits that are there. Well, money will cover up the bad habits for so long. And then once that
Mm-hmm.
money starts eroding away, now you're in a situation where you got to fix the problems that are going on. And this is true in virtually every company at some point, because as companies grow, they have more people, they have more complexity.
Mm-hmm.
And as that happens, then there's going to be little kinks in the armor that develop. But yeah, it's really working with those people that like getting their hands dirty, that don't care that I show up actually prefer that I don't show up in a 3-piece suit,
Yeah.
because they're very down to earth, they're very easy to talk to,
Mm-hmm.
and they get it. They understand what it takes to be successful, and ultimately, a lot of them are coachable. So that's
Yes.
also an advantage. They're willing to listen to what you have to say, and I try to bring things across in more of a conversational approach, not you should do this or you should do that, because that creates resistance. But if we can talk about what they're trying to accomplish, I can work them through a series of questions to uncover, the solution to that, and then affirm that solution. The probability of them actually doing it is much, much higher, because it's their idea, not mine.
Yeah, I think that's something that I'm pretty good at doing when you talk about coachability and stuff like that. Because with the shareholders that have invested, pre-seed round in one of my startups, um, I think one of the reasons why they chose to put that investment in me is also because of how relaxed I am in regards to being able to communicate, and how determined I am to make sure the thing works, and how receptive I am to feedback. I think a lot of founders, they're not receptive to feedback. They don't want to hear it. You need to have a certain level of ego to think you can build something from scratch and make it valuable into the market anyways. But you also, I think, need to have a healthy level of ego to control that ego and tone it down a bit, and hear the thoughts from different people, and get different perspectives, so it can expand your mind, over the course of time as you're building, your business from the ground up. And I think it's something that I learned from the military.
Yep.
It forces you to be humble, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah, where it's like, and for me, I was always super, super humble, in the sense of I had an ego, but I knew I had to control it, and I was also humble at the same time, if that makes sense. And I also was able to. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no, you
Go ahead.
keep going, keep going.
Yeah, I was gonna say that it helped me a lot with promotion, because I was able to achieve the status of sergeant in 2.5 years, where it usually
Nice.
takes people like 4 to 5 years to be able to achieve that. And so I think it was part of the reason was because I was able to tone down my ego and be humble enough to be receptive to feedback.
Yeah, we need enough of an ego that keeps us going. If you
Yes.
have no ego, you will be crushed. I mean, the world is not a nice place, so you got to have some level of self-confidence to keep the ball moving forward. But you're right,
Mhm.
you have to be able to know when to kind of flip that switch off and be accepting of what others are saying. I also like the fact that, as you were telling me all this, I'm sitting here smiling, going, "You just proved my one of the first questions you asked me, which is, would you hire based on skill or would you hire based on attitude?" You're getting investors because they believe in you as a person.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily, I mean, they obviously see some level of skill set there for you to accomplish what you're doing, but ultimately they're
Mhm.
looking at you as the individual that they're putting money into. It's not the product or the idea. And I often hear this, and I think, if you ever watch Shark Tank, they've even talked about
Mhm.
it on there. Somebody might have an okay idea, but they might be a stellar person. They've got the tenacity, go get them.
Mhm.
They're really good as far as attitude, and they'll take a greater risk on that person than they would on somebody who thinks they're all that and a bag of donuts, and really they just they don't have it, even if they have the best idea in the world, because who wants to deal with a narcissistic a-hole, really, what
Yes.
it comes down to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I was going to ask you, what advice could you give to somebody that's trying to start a business today, especially like a young founder? what would you say in regards to what they should do first? Is it,
Sure.
do you think it's refined skill set, communication? What would you say?
I worry less about skill set because even when I started this business, I knew a lot, but I didn't know everything. I learned a lot along the way. Now I had roughly 9 years worth of experience working in corporate America ahead of this. So that did give me some good footing, but it
Mm-hmm.
took me a long time to find my path. So for me, it's about, what interests you, what motivates you, where do you have something that again is unique or could separate you, set you apart. um, get feedback from other people, but people who are not necessarily your friends. And the reason I say that is your friends will always cheer you on. They will
Yes.
always tell you, oh, this is great. This is good. Yes, you should do this. And sometimes they also give you bad advice. That's what
Mm-hmm.
led to me going down a lot of different job or career paths or business paths before I figured this thing out, because people said, well, gosh, you're really good at marketing and sales. You should do that. Or, you really figured out this web design thing. You should do that. And I would try
Mm-hmm.
all those things based off of their advice, but it really didn't drive me as far as passion. I didn't have the motivation, if you will. It wasn't,
Yeah.
it didn't encompass my soul, if you will.
Yes.
And that's what I think people need to figure out. So for me, it's try early, try often, fail quick, fail cheap. So if it's not
Yeah.
going to work, no, it's not going to work within a couple $100 or even a couple $1,000. Don't plunk thousands upon thousands of dollars into something and then, oh my gosh, what have I done?
Yes.
Figure out, try different things, and if you can, try multiple things at the same time and start seeing where your interests are gravitating for and where you're starting to see traction build. I'm not saying
Mm-hmm.
doing 20 different things, but if you got two or three different ideas and they have some, they can be run concurrently, and you're just kind of testing the market, that's not necessarily a bad thing to do, because at some point something will shine, something will step forward and say, you know what, this seems to be gaining some momentum. The other two go away, and that's where you then put all your efforts. But by then you've hopefully figured out how that fits into your lifestyle, how it will drive where you want to go, and what it's going to
Mm-hmm.
take to get there. I would also say the last part of this is not everyone is Elon Musk. I think a lot of business owners kind of look at, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, pick your multi-billion-dollar CEO, startup guy, and they try to emulate that. And
Yes.
you can be highly successful working a small business that makes less than $1 million a year and can be highly profitable doing that. You can also be
Mm-hmm.
highly successful in a business that makes tens of millions of dollars a year. What your
Mm-hmm.
path is going to vary depending upon what you do, but just realize the ultimate goal of what you're trying to accomplish. So again, what's your individual purpose? What's your vision for yourself? Where do you want to go?
Mm-hmm.
What do you want to be? What do you want your lifestyle to be? And that can dictate a lot of how that business is going to develop. And
Mm-hmm.
like I said, it doesn't need to be a $10 billion company. You can have a very good lifestyle with a couple 100,000 or even a couple million, depending
Mm-hmm.
upon what you create and how you invest it.
Yeah, absolutely. My final question for you, because we're running a little bit out of time here,
Sure.
but my final question is, man, this has been a great conversation, by the way. But
Thank you.
my final question is, do you think that it's absolutely mandatory that you have an online presence to start a business now in 2023?
Um, we're running out of time, right? It's I would say it provides you with a greater opportunity, again, depending upon what your business is. I have seen
Mhm.
businesses that have very little online presence be highly successful.
Mm,
Take construction or trades. It's really about the work you do, the quality of work, the work ethic, the ability to get the job done on time, on budget.
mhm,
Um, could you have a website? Do you have a website? I see a lot of these companies that might. Does it really
mm,
drive business to them? No, it's almost all referral business. So to me, it's how you leverage your network. Now, your network could be mostly digital, in which case then I would say, yes, digital is definitely the way you got to go.
mm,
In other cases, though, it could be very much face to face. And, we are still human beings. We are still social creatures. we need ways to connect. We thought social media was going to be the end all be all. I don't think it's gotten us quite there. We still need that FaceTime. We still need to meet people in person. We still need to talk. And I think it was more apparent than ever when the pandemic hit, because everything went from going to the office to now everyone's meeting on Zoom and everything's digital and you never have to leave your house. While there's a lot of good with that, again, not everything's perfect. So we took away that social feature that a lot of people desire and moved it to a digital world, and it's just not the same. You still need that individual connection, and I think that's what we're kind of seeing as we come out of where we were at in 2020, 2021, where some people definitely wanted to go back to work, and of course there are other people that didn't, but that's also for there's different motivations there why that might not be happening. But even during the pandemic, we saw people that would make an effort to get together in social events, even though there was a lot of restrictions put in place, or there was at the very least a lot of dissent online about doing such a thing. So, those are kind of all the pieces I see going in. So yeah, is digital very important? Yes. 90% of the time, I would say you have to have some form of digital presence. There are going to be a few examples where it's not necessary. For me, the digital presence really is about giving me some legitimacy. So it's showing that I do exist. It's kind of my bricks and mortar, if you will, because people can connect with me like we're connecting here. They can connect through, my podcast, my website, whatever it might be. And it's, same as what you're developing yourself. So there is a lot of momentum that is created through that. And I would encourage most people to really consider what they're doing on the digital marketplace and seek it to develop that if it makes sense.
Well said, Dan. I appreciate you so much for coming on, man. It's been a pleasure.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah. And where can people find you on the internet?
Easiest place to find me, other than pretty much every social channel, is I do have a website. You can go to danpaulsonletsgo.com. Doing a lot of personal branding there myself, but that's essentially my homepage now, and that's how you can get a hold of me. We also have a podcast, so we have something called Books in the Biz, where I have a CFO and I'm the operations guy, and we sit there, we banter back and forth about different situations and kind of explain to people what they need to look at from the marriage of that finance versus operations point of view.
Awesome. Where can people find the podcast?
You can find it on everything from Apple Podcasts to whatnot. The website for that is booksandbiz.com, BOOKS, the letter N, BIZ.com. And that's probably the easiest way to get to all the episodes.
Awesome, Dan. Dan, we got to do this again, man. This has been great. I didn't even get to go through all my questions.
No, this has been fun. I really appreciate it, Vandras.
Yeah. Thank you. This has been another great episode of the Mooncast, man. And peace.